Deze man weet zo ontzettend veel van Bitcoin dat hij geen presentatie nodig heeft.
Oh.
Of geen slides nodig heeft.
No slides?
Trace heb ik leren kennen via Tony Galipi van BitPay.
Ja.
En Trace die, is eigenlijk een van de eerste mensen, echt voordat het 10 cent waard werd, was hij er al over aan het bloggen. En hij heeft daar ook met heel veel media, internationale media, over gesproken. Trace investeert in technologie zoals Armory Wallet, BitPay, de beurs Kraken. En het leuke is, ondanks dat hij zo ver al in de voorhoede erbij was, is hij nog steeds ook een van de personen die, net als ik zegt, de koers is eigenlijk het minst interessante aan die Bitcoin. Trace, a warm welcome for Trace.
Welcome, thanks for having me. I just arrived because French ATC is on strike, so the planes are not on time like the Swiss. Anyways, when we look at Bitcoin, I think it's important for us to kind of zoom out and look at it. Oh, hey, can you hear me now? I was saying that the French ATC was on strike, so I was just barely got here. Yeah, so when we look at Bitcoin, I think we want to kind of zoom out and look at it in the context of all of human history. That's at least where I want to kind of start. Of those of us here, how many are actual Bitcoin users? Yeah, so most people. Okay, so I know who I'm talking to. When the Gutenberg press came about, you know, what were some of the first applications? In 1499, they published the first romance novel, you know, got to the important stuff. It wasn't for another 150 years that we came up with the scientific journal. But in 1517, Copernicus, he laid down the quantity theory of money. Copernicus was one of our greatest geniuses, 185 IQ. 100's the average, 15 is a standard deviation, so he's way outside the norm. In 1526, he wrote Monete-Coudonné ratio. It's the study of the value of money. You know, one of our greatest scientists writing about money. Does anybody have any idea who came up with the gold standard? Yeah? Isaac Newton. He had 195 IQ approximately, came up with the gold standard. It was very Newtonian in the way that it moved capital back and forth. He was also master of the mint. How about one of our greatest minds ever in humanity, Johann von Goethe, 215 IQ. Does anybody have any idea how he might apply to this monetary history that we're talking about? This is from his Faust, Part 2, written in 1831, shortly before he died. Mephistopheles. In this world, what isn't lacking somewhere, though, sometimes it's this or that. Here's what's missing, gold. The Chancellor responded, you're fostering the corrupted will. Fools are always hand in hand. Mephistopheles. By this I recognize the most learned Lord. What you can't feel lies miles abroad. What you can't grasp you think is done with too. What you don't count on can't be true. What you can't weigh won't weigh of old. That you don't coin, that can't be gold. There's this idea of chartalism, the state theory of money, that money has value because the state says it has value. But this contradicts with the subjective value theory from the Austrian School of Economics, that we value things as individuals. The emperor responded to this, I'm tired of the eternal if and when. We're short of gold, we'll find, so fetch some then. You know, we need bailouts because in the short term, that's what matters. In the long term, we're all dead. Mephistopheles responded, I'll fetch what you wish and I'll fetch more. Easy it's true, but then easy things weigh more. It's there already, yet how we might achieve it, that's the tricky thing, knowing how to seize it. Executive Order 6102, Franklin Roosevelt, President of the United States, seized all of the gold, demonetizing it from the world monetary system. The treasurer, for a fool his aim's not out of sight, it's true, that's an old imperial right. this right of coinage. You know, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. You know, that's why we stamp onto it as legal tender. Money, it's a very critical good in society that has played a critical role with the state. The chancellor, Satan lays out his gilded nets for you. These things don't square with what's good and true. The steward, only bring them to court, I'll welcome the sight, and I'll gladly accept the thing as not quite right. There was a case in 1991. It was Fisher versus the city of Dover in the United States. The United States Supreme Court declined a writ of certiorari that would have decided the issue of whether a contract which had gold priced at $35 an ounce, which it was before when Franklin Roosevelt rechanged the peg to the current market value. They declined to hear that issue, impairing the obligation of contracts. You know, if you have a bond and it's denominated in a certain amount of gold or a certain amount of euros or a certain amount of French francs, or etc., if you interfere with that monetary unit, it changes the deal. You know, so we saw that when the euro got introduced. All the currencies, all the contracts just got by decree changed over. But I promised to pay back Italian lira. Why do I have to pay back euros? The commander-in-chief, the fool's clever to promise what each of us needs. A soldier will never ask from when it all proceeds. And that's ultimately what we look at when we're at the heart of monetary chaos. You know, we're in what James Rickards, he had been general counsel for long-term capital management. He's written a book called Currency Wars. And we're seeing these currency wars beginning to really take shape. Sanctions on Russia. So what do? What's Putin do? I wonder what the $3.8 billion security deposit that he's requiring Visa and MasterCard to put down, I wonder if that's related to how much his buddies lost in the sanctions. We have Operation Choke Point in the U.S. That's where 20 different industries are being shut out of the U.S. banking system without due process, without court orders or anything, just because they don't want those. They want them to be strangled from access to the monetary system. But they're completely legal activities that these businesses are engaged in. There's actually been floated in the European Parliament the right to a bank account, that you can't just be denied a bank account because the bank doesn't necessarily like what you're doing, etc. But I think Alan Greenspan, he really hit the nail on the head here. He said, in the absence of the gold standard, and he wrote this back in 1967, there is no way to protect savings from confiscation through inflation. There is no safe store of value. If there were, the government would have to make its holding illegal, as was done in the case of gold. Executive Order 6102, 10 years in jail for holding this inert yellow metal. This is the shabby secret of the welfare status tirades against gold. Deficit spending is simply a scheme for the confiscation of wealth. Gold stands in the way of this insidious process. It stands as a protector of property rights. Property rights being what have allowed for our very complex ordering of society, our ability to trust one another, to engage in contract, to perform calculations of value, that if one grasps this, one has no difficulty in understanding the status antagonism toward the gold standard. Ludwig von Mises, he wrote in The Theory of Money and Credit, it is impossible to grasp the meaning of the idea of sound money if one does not realize that it was devised as an instrument for the protection of civil liberties against despotic inroads on the part of governments. Ideologically, it belongs in the same class with political constitutions and bills of right. How does that relate to Bitcoin, though? Anybody know when Satoshi's birthday is? Our anonymous Satoshi guy. Someone actually figured this out on Reddit. They figured out Satoshi's birthday. And the way they figured out Satoshi's birthday was he had signed up for this Ning peer-to-peer forum where he could kind of post messages. And he had to choose a birthday as part of that. And next to his name, it would show how old he was. So he was 35 on the Wayback Machine at these dates, and he was 36 on these dates, and they were able to hone in on his birth date. And guess what he chose for his birthday? April 5th, 1975. Now, why would Satoshi choose April 5th, 1975? 1974, Ralph Merkle invented the Merkle puzzles for Merkle tree, Merkle root. That's used in the blockchain. It wasn't published until 1978, so probably not 1974. Diffie-Hellman came up with asymmetric key crypto system that they published in 1976. So if we take the average of the two, maybe that's why he chose it. No, April 5th, 1933, Franklin Roosevelt issued Executive Order 6102. And in 1975, Richard Nixon re-legalized the ownership of gold for U.S. citizens. Perhaps that's why he chose this seemingly random date. Alan Greenspan, he testified twice before Congress. Nor can private counterparties restrict supplies of gold, another commodity whose derivatives are often traded over the counter, where central banks, plural, stand ready to lease gold in increasing quantities should the price rise. I've read a lot of books, I've read a lot of cases, I've read a lot of things, and I've rarely ran into this behavior before. Prices being suppressed, not supported, and not by users, but by owners, and not for the obvious reasons. If you own a lot of something, why run a cartel to keep the price down? The power of governments to issue what we use as money is infinitely more valuable than the price of a portfolio asset. Thus, the protection of their fiat paper franchises, of the Bernanke coin, of the Yellen coin, of the Draghi coin, is vital to the state's interest of engaging in confiscation through inflation, which is a form of taxation without representation, and also speaks to the market and entrepreneurial opportunity for currency entrepreneurs. This is the primary reason why monetary evolution has been so extensively throttled through regulation, even with the internet being around for 2 decades. But Bitcoin, and more generally blockchain technology in general, is censorship resistant, which empowers individuals to engage in innovation without prior restraint or permission. And being censorship resistant, where individuals can solely hold the private keys of this new asset class, will change the risk-free calculation of value. Thus, Bitcoin's economic censorship resistance will reorganize the factors of production worldwide due to interest rates being unshackled from political whims. Consequently, just like the internet has assaulted the postal service, radio, newspapers, television, and countless other business models, now creative destruction and massive wealth transfer is coming to the largest and most protected markets in the world, fiat currency and fractional reserve banking. But blockchain technology will have an even larger effect than just the currency markets, which is but one of thousands of potential applications. The entire application of property rights and how society organizes itself will also be impacted. This is one of the reasons, I think, that Bitcoin has the potential for such radical innovation and disruption. Michael Novogratz, he's the CIO at Fortress. They manage $56 billion, something like that. This is what he said. Someone asked him, well, why are you investing in Bitcoin? Because Fortress has $20 million worth of Bitcoins on the balance sheet. And he responded to Business Insider, at least this was the quote on their site, there are, in best estimates, somewhere between 30,000 individual programmers working on Bitcoin. Our modern-day scientists, working in computer science as opposed to, say, physics or something, although the number of PhDs in physics and all these branches of science working in Bitcoin really amazes you. My college roommate lives down in Barbados. He was the smartest guy that we went to school with, and Novogratz went to Princeton. He works full-time on Bitcoin derivatives. So there's this open source community where there's huge brain power, Why do you think Bitcoins are being dropped on MIT, of all places? Let alone all the VC money that's going in. BitPay, I was a seed round investor in BitPay, and Tony and Steven, wild and crazy guys, done a great job. Just raised $30 million this past week from Index Ventures and some others. And so from Mark Andreessen and his company to Benchmark, there's lots of smart money going in. I've never seen a small project with more human capital going into it. And so I kind of want to bet just alone on that. My assertion would be that Bitcoin is the largest advancement in monetary science since Isaac Newton's gold standard. It's an internet protocol layer, so it'll go in the stack. It's triple entry bookkeeping, as we had seen. That there's a debit and a credit, and the validation by the network, that distributed consensus, the ability to have programmable trust, a critical component for the internet that's now been developed. And as I said, only one application of thousands is this idea of currency. And yet that one application can disrupt the largest, most entrenched market in the world. BitPay raised $30 million. Coinbase in December raised $25 million. Zappo raised $20 million in March. So we're starting to see the VCs, the disruptors and the innovators starting to come into this market. It's getting very exciting. We have a lot of innovations happening. Where Bitcoin is different than our previous forms of money or currency is with gold, you had something that was limited in amount, but it wasn't extensible. It's 79 photons. I mean, that's it. You got the dollar and you got fiat currencies, and they're not limited in amount, as we've seen from the fiat currency graveyard, just littered with currencies from nations, but they're extensible. You can actually build them and increase what they do and their functionality. Bitcoin is both limited in amount and extensible, which, in my opinion, is going to make it a very formidable competitor to any other units of account or ways of transferring or storing value. And it's also censorship resistant, so it's still around. So is it fit for purpose? We have large open source projects happening with Bitcoin. Things like Bitcore, Armory, which is one of the companies I'm invested in. We focus on the security of Bitcoin at Armory. Alan Reiner, who will be presenting at this Bitcoin Foundation conference, he innovated the whole concept of cold storage. That's where we keep the private keys on a computer that's never touched the internet. And so you can create a transaction and do everything you need except for signing it, and you can put it on a USB drive, put it in the computer, sign the transaction, move it back, broadcast it to the network. So that air gap greatly reduces the attack surface and thus it greatly improves the security of your Bitcoins. We've just created a new multi-signature cold storage option that we've released. So like this mess that happened at Mt. Gox where 500 million Bitcoins, we found 200,000 in there, things like that are going to go away. We've now innovated Bitcoin and the Bitcoin wallet technology to the area where it's not really, there's really no excuse anymore for that low level of standard of care when handling Bitcoins. We also have, Alan also, just in time for this conference, released something called simulfunding. And what simulfunding does is it'll create an address, and then everybody can, it uses a principle of CoinJoin. CoinJoin is where you're all able to sign the transaction, but the transaction isn't valid until everybody is signed. And so like when we were raising money for BitPay, we were waiting for everybody to send their wire transfers in. Well, this simulfunding, everybody would be able to prove that they have the funds, and they would be able to sign the transaction, but the transaction wouldn't actually execute until everybody has signed. You know, that's a way, we don't have a way to do that in angel investing or seed investing or venture capital or real estate or cars or airplanes, etc. We don't have a way to do that right now where we make sure that all the wires are in before they're sent. But with Bitcoin, we've now built that functionality in the Armory wallet. We also have BitTorrent integration with BitTornado. And then with this proof of work that Bitcoin has, it enables a lot of other really interesting, features. One of them being BitMessage. BitMessage is a way that we can send communications like emails around, but there's no metadata, and it's all encrypted. And so we can apply that functionality to things like Armory, etc., and we can be broadcasting our transactions all over the place and doing it very securely, but still having it all offline. How many billions and hundreds of billions of dollars are lost due to identity theft and things of that nature? So Bitcoin is going to remove a lot of these problems. Title registry, notary, smart property, atomic trading of assets. The architect at IBM was talking about smart property and how you could have shares of Twitter trading on the blockchain. You know, you trade the Bitcoins and the Twitter shares atomically in the same transaction. No counterparty risk, settlement, transaction, clearing, all of it done, all of it registered in there. You don't have to rely on the DTCC. You don't have to really rely on paper share certificates anymore. All of this stuff. I think the big trend that we're seeing is that basically everything that can be decentralized will be decentralized. We have GitHub. We've got GitHub, which has distributed version control. We're able to effectively have cooperation without coordination. Bitcoin open source projects are growing much faster, much more securely than all of the other projects out there. Because of that, it's one of the reasons Linux has such a dominant position in the